Battles rage for the fates of entire continents as great powers seek to stay ahead and underdogs scramble to bring themselves back to relevance. Welcome back, everybody. This is Doc Ito, the voice of Radio Free Cylinder, coming to you tonight with narration courtesy of Nopecopter, aka The X Factors, for Episode 11 of the Civ Battle Royale X Season 3, A Step Too Far. Hello and welcome. I'm Nopecopter, and I'll be your narrator this time around. I apologize for any issues with the narration this time. It was a bit of a rush job, and I had to scrap a lot of narration due to time issues, but hopefully it's as enjoyable as ever. We've got a lot to cover this time, so strap in. Berea's maps are always a treat, and with Castile finally visible, they're better than ever. Be sure to appreciate the cylinder as it is now, because it'll never be the same again. Orange Chrissy's comics are another staple of the subreddit, and for good reason. They're damn great. America's constant dark ages make for natural joke material. They're as funny as they are slightly depressing, considering how much they're crippling an otherwise solid Civ. Talk about dark humor. As always, a massive thank you to the Ko-Fi supporters who keep this game running. Without them, running an AI game of this scale would be infinitely harder. Ko-Fi supporters get some pretty neat perks too, so if you have the money to spare, it might be worth tossing some towards the showrunners. Tuva takes their spot at the top of the power rankings for the second time in a row, for good reason. They're currently winning a war against the former Rank 1 Civ, the Permians, but can they stick the landing and close out the war with a decisive victory? Let's find out. We kick things off today with a rather disappointing sight. Despite being under attack from all sides at sea, North Korea's defense of their home peninsula holds strong as the Ming naval assault on Cheongjin collapses. The Ainu assault on Tajihi Sarugake isn't faring much better, and Mori hasn't even bothered to send any ships to help the war effort. North Korea is safe for now. In a surprise twist, Indonesia is now putting in the bulk of the work against the Filipino city of Cavite El Viejo, as the Kokang fleet makes a temporary retreat. The city is in fine enough shape for now, but with an Indonesian fleet that large, the Philippines could soon be reduced to just their capital. And Indonesia is already thinking ahead, too. They've already declared war on Cambodia, so that they can immediately get to conquering once they secure Cavite El Viejo. The Massaguete have flipped Izcar out of the hands of the Permians once again, routing their token relief force. Oxus is also under heavy siege, but it remains in Permian hands for now. That said, it seems like the Permians simply don't have the forces in the area to keep up the fight. Could this be the start of a Massaguete comeback? Also of note, North Korea negotiates peace with the Ainu. The Permians are seeing a bit more success on the eastern front, having retaken Izyur from Tuva, but it doesn't take a genius to see that the Tuvans still have quite the advantage. Tuva has units for days, though they're mostly ranged, while the Permians seem to be running a bit low and have much less presence on the front lines. Tuva's signature singing arrows in particular have struck fear into the Permian forces and caused their morale to drop significantly, with a deafening "woo!" The sound of thousands of arrows signals the coming of death itself. The Kaya Po, as dedicated to the arts as ever, have constructed the Hagia Sophia in their capital of Kormoro. This wonder grants the city a free temple and a free great prophet, in addition to generating plenty of extra faith. Also, just look at how many people live in Kormoro. It's ridiculous. Botswana has established a principality. Looking at their lands, they're still as underwhelming as ever in terms of size, thanks in part to that settler who isn't doing anything, and their military comes up just a bit short against their neighbors. Their war against the Kilwa has also achieved nothing thus far, but that was to be expected. Chile has adopted a monarchy, providing an opportunity to survey their lands. Their core is certainly impressive, their navy in particular, but they just don't look quite strong enough to overrun Rio de la Plata just yet. Their production is much higher, however, so at this rate it's only a matter of time. The Massaguete outpost of Karakum is still fine, despite both the Lithuanians and the Permians being at war with the city. Lithuania has sent a few units to attack, but they haven't really been able to do much just yet. The Inca-Chilean War hasn't seen much progress on land, but at sea, the Chileans appear to have a slight edge. They had a numerical advantage in terms of ships at the beginning of the war, too, but considering the bulk of the Chilean navy hasn't even reached the front lines yet, the Inca may not have control over their own waters for long. The Mojave have declared war on the Modoc, finally returning the favor for that Modoc invasion so long ago. Honestly, that Modoc carpet looks a bit too big for the Mojave to wipe out, even if it's largely out of date, but it's still the exact kind of move that Irataba needs to be making in order to stay competitive. The Yolngu have done it. They've settled a third city. It's probably too late for them to make a true comeback at this point, but Australia is still pretty empty, and the Wiradjuri have been horribly underwhelming thus far, so I'd hardly say that Yolngu expansion doesn't matter. Tuva has not only retaken Izyur once again, but also secured Iskor. The Permian military has regrouped and formed a defensive line, but they seem to be running out of soldiers. The Tuvans, by contrast, just keep coming. The Permians' only hope at this point is the serious lack of melee units in the Tuvan carpet. Kilwa has evidently managed to flip Mbarara for just a moment, only to lose it to Uganda once more. Both sides of the conflict have plenty more units in the area, so unless the two can come to a mutual agreement, this war will probably continue to rage for quite a while longer. While Vermont's Icelandic colony is realistically pretty screwed, provided Greenland actually sends a fleet, their capital of Windsor is actually doing just fine. The Greenlandic navy is being held up at sea by 2 Vermont triremes, and Holsteinsborg completely lacks a military to threaten Vermont's capital with. Leading the defense of Windsor is Juan Perón, the former president of Argentina, founder of Peronism as an ideology, and husband of Mark II's Eva Perón. Why he's not in Rio de la Plata, I don't know, but he's clearly doing a pretty good job with what he's been given. The Inca maintain total domination over Polynesia, with 4 cities settled and 2 more on the way. At this rate, the Maori won't even get to settle a single island. But considering the Chilean and Maori navies, the Inca might not hold these cities for too long either. At least it's peaceful here for now. The Ainu have decided that the Kwakwaka'wakw are too dangerous a force to be left alone in the Arctic, and so they've declared war. While that Ainu force may look intimidating at first, notice that it's mostly embarked composite bowmen, which are useless. The Kwaks, on the other hand, have quite the nice navy back home. The Ainu aren't the only ones going after the Kwaks, it seems. Not only have the Cree also declared war on their black and pink neighbors, but they've also taken the opportunity to join the fight to eliminate the Modoc as well. The Rocky Mountains pose a significant barrier, and the risk of the wars devolving into a stalemate is high, but any victory here would be huge for the Cree. Here's a quick look at the Rio de la Plata Corps. where things are looking just serviceable enough that an invasion from any one of their neighbors shouldn't cause them to instantly collapse. Still, their military is unimpressive, and while they are still trying to settle, they're losing too much money to really close the gap between them and, say, Chile. Also worth noting are the Brazilian fleet around Rio de Janeiro and the sizable Kayapó force around Mecragnoti. The Massagetè have finally retaken Oxus at long last. There's still a token Permian force around both Oxus and Iscar, but it seems like the Massagetè will be holding them for the foreseeable future, considering the lack of Permian troops beyond the front lines. Isur flips and then flips back as the Permians attempt to regain their lost territory. While the front lines look even for now, the reserves of each civilization tell the full story. The Permian core is absolutely barren, while the portion of the Tuvan lands we can see are full of fresh recruits ready to push west. Afghanistan is looking as impressive as ever with their massive empire. Sure, their carpet isn't super imposing at first glance, but they're one of the few civs with access to pikemen, and they have a road system to allow their troops to easily mobilize across their empire. Their stats are all rock solid too, so Afghanistan isn't likely to fall from their top-tier ranking anytime soon. In case you've forgotten, Lithuania is also plenty imposing. Their military is large both on land and at sea, their core is rock solid, and while they're somewhat lacking in easy targets, none of their neighbors pose an active threat to them. Their UU, the Samogishan warrior, is a swordsman which gains a massive strength bonus and free health per turn while on a forest tile, perfect for fighting on their eastern and southern borders. Lithuania is certainly a force to be reckoned with, though luckily for everyone around them, they currently seem preoccupied with invading the Massagetè outpost to their northeast. And now for a quick break to look at the world's governments. I'll be saving most of my commentary here for the lore section, but I do want to point out some highlights too, namely the Irish theocratic state and the Anglo-Norse dictatorship. As previously mentioned, Afghanistan is a peasants' republic, with the nation proving too large and rugged for a governing body to truly control. The Ainu are a principality ruled by the citizens, with the previous monarchy downgraded to a much less powerful role. Ireland is now a full-on theocratic state, with the priesthood seizing full control of the nation to protect it from the heathens to the east. America is still a tribe, with an oligarchic tribal council desperately trying to hold the nation together through its latest Dark Age. The former theocratic state of the Anglo-Dutch has been overthrown in a populist revolution due to growing corruption among the clergy, with the nation now taking the form of a republic. The Anglo-Norse, beaten and fearful, have turned to a military dictatorship to keep them safe from Brandenburg and Lithuania. Angola is still a tribe, or rather a collection of tribes, under the rule of the mighty warrior Jonas Savimbi the Conqueror. The Arapaho are also still one large confederation of tribes, all following the same tradition of military rule. Bengal remains a tribal entity, prosperous but hardly united. The people of Bengali Sumatra, for instance, only nominally recognize Shuja'uddin Muhammad Khan as their overlord. Botswana is still a peasants' republic, as per Seretse Khama's wishes. Brandenburg is also still a tribe. More specifically, it's a collection of towns and cities where each function as their own microstate, with Frederick William I merely hosting an occasional council between the heads of each town to discuss matters of Brandenburg as a whole. Brazil is a monarchy under Pedro I and his nobles. Pedro's kingdom is small, but the people are evidently happy. Cambodia is nominally a republic, though only a select class of oligarchs can actually vote. Sihanouk himself is not often involved in governmental affairs anymore. Instead, he's taken to equestrianism. Castile is a monarchy ruled by the bourgeoisie, and as such, the peasants and the rural population are completely ignored in favor of the whims of the city folk. In fact, it is often said that, to Isabella, everything outside the walls of Madrid might as well be an empty void. The Kayapo have abandoned their former republic and instead come under the rule of a theocratic state, with the priesthood and prophets established by Raoni taking full control of the state's affairs. Central America is now a republic dominated by the populists, who continue to look inward and appease the citizenry rather than bothering to expand outward into the rapidly dwindling available land in Mesoamerica. Chad is a tribe, or rather a confederation of tribes. Everybody gets a say in the affairs of the tribe, which has become quite cumbersome as the Chadian people have expanded all across northern Africa. The Cree are still under the control of the monarchy. King Poundmaker is untested, but eager to prove that his reign is just. Timor-Leste is a republic ruled by the populists, who have promised to repair the economy and treat the people right. Egypt is still a tribe, now ruled primarily by the commons. Notably, Akhenaten has been all but ousted from power for his failures, and the House of Commons now operates the government from Thebes, while Akhetaten has been reduced to more of a symbolic capital. Greenland is a peasants' republic ruled communally by all who live within its borders, which is a big reason why they've been so eager to expand throughout the sea. More coastline means more room to fish and a more prosperous life for the primarily sea-based Greenlandic peasantry. Han is a principality now, with the massive majority of the power located in the hands of the wealthy merchant class and business magnates, who have established a stranglehold on the economy. Kocho is a tribe ruled by a small noble family, still stubbornly clinging on to power due to their claims of divine righteousness. So long as the Kocho continue to miraculously fend off much larger empires, the Kocho nobles hardly need to worry about the faith of their people waning. The Inca are a peasant republic under the nominal rule of Prince Tupac Yupanqui, who has taken on a primarily ceremonial and spiritual role, as well as becoming a patron of the arts. Indonesia remains a tribe, though the various Indonesian families and towns are fairly close-knit, despite the ocean separating them from one another. Kokang is also still a tribal entity, but a council of elders keeps the various tribes of Kokang tied fairly closely together. The Permians are ruled by a monarchy, though clearly King Azuke is struggling to enact his will over the more far-flung corners of his kingdom. The Kwakwakuwaku have deposed their former principality and established a republic by simply refusing to fight until Willie Seaweed gave in. Now several populist leaders have been elected into power, and Willie Seaweed has only minor power over his civilization. The Kievan Rus are still a tribe, yet populism still rules the day as Chiefess Olga has apparently fled into the woods at the sight of the Lithuanian armies to consult with Allah. Lithuania is still a military dictatorship under the iron fist of Gediminas and his elite soldiers. Mali is a republic, albeit one ruled by the oligarchic upper class. The general populace is less than happy about this, especially considering how slowly anything gets done with the oligarchs in charge. The Maori remain a tribal confederation even now, with each family mostly doing their own thing. The Massagette are also a tribal confederation. While Tamiris is their mighty battlemaster, decisions are made by every member of the confederation, even the lowest members of society. The Ming Peasants' Republic has collapsed, with a monarchy under King Yongle rising in its place. The people view his rule with suspicion, but they're willing to accept it for now after the disastrous war against North Korea and the subsequent infighting. The Modoc remain a tribe, but the magnates hold all the power. They finance the military, so the rest of the tribe gives them effectively free rein in return. The Mojave have shifted from a peasants' republic to a principality. The citizens still hold the power, but now it's mostly the higher class citizens who get a say rather than the peasantry. Mori remains under the control of the monarchy, though a House of Commons has been put in place to check the power of King Mori Motonari. Unfortunately, the House of Commons has been startlingly bad at getting the government to actually do anything, so not much has really changed. Tetuan is still a tribal confederation, connected primarily by sea. The Gokturks are also one large tribal confederation. Turkey, the other ancient theocratic state, alongside the Anglo-Dutch, has also been overthrown by a populist republic. The revolution was led by none other than Ataturk himself, now sporting the epithet the Beloved for his actions in service of his people. Tuva is also a populist republic, keeping the core Tuvan lands stable while the war with the Permians rages on their borders. Uganda is, surprise, a military dictatorship led by the mad Idi Amin the Conqueror. Vermont is still just a tribe, and given how happy the people of Vermont are, this seems unlikely to change anytime soon. Vladimir is still ruled by a fairly standard monarchy, with King Vsevolod exercising his divine right to rule. The Wiradjuri monarchy has descended into an all-out military dictatorship, with Winradine's fickleness in warfare and failure to stop the Maori from settling Australia, seeing him ousted by his own troops. Yemen is an oligarchic republic, with the sheer amount of wealth pouring in from trade giving rise to an extremely powerful merchant elite. The Yolngu, in response to the Wiradjuri military coup, have given power to their own military in response. They are also now under the control of a military dictatorship. Yugoslavia is another oligarchic republic, with law speaker Tito still seemingly at the head. America continues to look fine enough on the outside, despite being a total mess on the inside. They've evidently declared war on the Quaks for some reason, likely to try and win back some easy prestige. Meanwhile, up north, it seems like Greenland is beating Vermont's defenses at sea. Egypt, effectively out of options to defend themselves from Turkey and Yemen, offers to let a small Chadian tribe settle just outside of their lands as long as they cut off the Arabian invaders in the process. Thus, the city of Fada is born, and cartographers around the world scream. Furious that the city of Ubate is refusing to pay tribute to them, the Kayapo declare war, inadvertently kicking off a war with the rest of the Muisca as well. This seems like a horrible mistake, but the Muisca army is very clearly not built for conquest, and the jungles of the Amazon remain as impenetrable as ever, so the Kayapo will probably get away with this scot-free. Meanwhile, America beats down on the Inca island city of Tiwanaku. The Filipino city of Cavite el Viejo has taken serious damage. However, the Indonesian fleet sent to take the city has grown restless, and several vessels have prematurely sailed towards the Filipino capital in hopes of scoring some real treasure. The Kokang Navy, meanwhile, has been forced to resort to embarked ranged units. Luckily for Indonesia, they have a second fleet on the way to the front lines. Hopefully this one doesn't also split apart right when progress starts being made. After ages of trying and failing to convert the Irish zealots, the Anglo-Dutch finally give up and agree to leave the Emerald Isles alone. Yugoslavia is a bigger problem anyways, after all. Ireland can now finally focus all their efforts on failing to invade Scandinavia some more. Oxus is now fully under the control of the Massagetæ. Unfortunately, however, this has come at the cost of Ishkar. A mysterious dancer from a faraway land comes to congratulate Tomyris on her victory regardless, since they'd already made the trek out there and all. More curiously, however, it seems that the Permian outpost of Ishma has changed hands to the Tuvans. After a hard-fought battle, the Permians have finally decided to cut their losses and surrender to Tuva, giving up on both Izkor and Izyur in the process. While this was the right call, it's also pretty decisively put an end to the era of Permian dominance if the events of the last episode hadn't already. On the other hand, Tuva has now demonstrated their power firsthand, cementing themselves as the top dogs of the game. Kilwa once again flips Mbarara, only to immediately lose it to Uganda again. While it may seem pointless, the Ugandan military is slowly thinning. Mbarara is almost out of melee units, while Kilwa ships and missionaries just keep coming. Also, it's not as relevant, but Yemen's looking pretty nice for a civ of their size. With the Irish Navy all but annihilated, Brandenburg is able to negotiate peace just in time to save the life of one of their settlers. They just have to agree not to settle the Irish Isles. Really though, this is a huge victory for Brandenburg. They've retained control over Scandinavia and can now focus on other things. Greenland's invasion of Windsor has utterly collapsed, and now Vermont is actually beginning to stage a counterattack on Holsteinsborg. Really, it's more like a raid, considering it mostly consists of a couple of composite bowmen, but it really goes to show how badly Greenland has screwed this up. The latest addition to the colorful collection of Sahara cities is Am Timan, settled by Chad just southeast of Tetuan. Sundiata Keita of Mali hardly seems fazed by the news of all this free land being eaten up, however. He's heard many tales of great West African empires done in by attempting to support too many worthless desert cities, after all. Taking a closer look at the newly Tuvan city of Ijma, it's honestly not bad for a desert exclave. River access, wheat, hills, and plenty of trade through the area, plus, of course, some exotic neighbors to the east. The Cree invasion of the Quaks is going rather poorly at the moment, with Quak soldiers taking up defensible positions across the Rocky Mountains to thwart the Cree approach. A few horsemen are getting through around Tsaxis, but it isn't nearly enough to threaten the city. The Modoc are helping too. A couple of Modoc troops are fighting off the Cree near Loon River. Now that the Arapaho have conquered the Comanche, they're free to settle all the empty land that the Comanche never bothered to conquer. Surely the Mojave will have no issues with this whatsoever, and won't ever consider turning that army around Aviquaame on these new settlements. The Muisca have sent a settler off into the Caribbean, but honestly it doesn't seem like there's enough room for another city there. In other Muisca-related news, though, they've sent their navy off to attack the city of Bao, with the ships being cheered on as they go by a strange dancer from a faraway land. Tiwanaku has successfully fended off the American naval assault, although it appears to have attracted some lost Muisca ships in return. Meanwhile, in Ubate, the Kayapo, not used to conventional warfare, attempt to sit outside the city and shame the citizens until they relent. This form of religious siege appears to work surprisingly well. Timor-Leste constructs non-Madol in their capital city of Dili, granting them +1 food, production, and gold for each sea tile worked by the city. For a city like this, non-Madol is a godsend. Olga has returned from her sabbatical and become enlightened. Allah has spoken to her, and he has told her to convert her government into a monastic order. The monks now rule the Kievan Rus, their religious devotion keeping their many enemies at bay. Aside from a monastic ruling class, the Kievan Rus have plenty of other neat things going on, such as their UU, the Ghost Convoy. It's a pikeman replacement that gains XP for luxury resources traded away and generates gold when promoted near a great merchant. Clearly, the merchants finance the Kievan military, while the monks rule the government. The merchant overlords of the Han have decided that Kocho's existence is incredibly inconvenient for the flow of trade routes through Asia, and so they convince the government to go and wipe them off the map. The Kievan Rus join in too, because apparently Kocho is full of heathens, and that's good enough for the monks. Lithuania has taken Karakum from the Massagetæ in a completely overkill fashion, sending no less than a dozen units to capture this one snowy exclave. Nonetheless, the city has been made into an example, and Lithuania's other neighbors should heed the warning. At least Karakum wasn't razed. The Incan navy has been decimated, and Chile now decisively rules the waves. The bulk of the Chilean navy hasn't even reached Incan waters yet, but when they do, Corihuarachina could be in serious trouble. The Massagetæ managed to reclaim Ishkar, but now Permian troops from the Tuvan front are making their way down to contest Oxus once more. The Massagetæ simply cannot catch a break. In slightly lighter news, though, it seems Khazaria is making the best of their bad situation by becoming the merchant lords of the Caspian, fielding not one, but 2 cargo ships in the sea. Louise Chrouy, renowned French fashion designer, has been pulling in customers from all over the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Timor-Leste has become a powerful force in the world of fashion, and the way people dress the world over has been given Chrouy's signature touch. Against all odds, Indonesia has successfully captured Cavite El Viejo from the Philippines with their final few triremes. There is a Filipino spearman nearby, but it's unable to capture the city. It seems like Suharto might actually hold on to this capture, which would be a massive deal. The Indonesian assault on Malolos has, rather expectedly, collapsed, however. In a move you literally could not make up, the newest great general hired by the North Koreans is none other than Douglas MacArthur, the American general infamous for almost screwing up the Korean War and attempting to escalate it into a full-scale war against the Chinese. This is probably one of the best great general assignments I've ever seen. Regardless, though, MacArthur was quite the successful general overall during his life. North Korea could certainly use that sort of military skill in their current situation. Tetuan has established a monarchy, perhaps inspired by the Castilians to their north. Now, with a more centralized government, Tetuan's disparate cities finally have something tying them all together, although they are still plagued by the Norman city of Capua slicing their territorial waters in half. Speaking of Castile, though, they've started producing a truly ridiculous amount of their horseman UU, the jinete. The jinete restores its HP and movement after capturing a city of a different religion, which is fairly irrelevant for now, considering that all of their neighbors practice Lutheranism, aside from Ireland, but it also has less of a penalty against cities and a higher flanking bonus, so it's still quite a formidable unit in large numbers. Bau is under attack by the Muisca Navy. However, considering that Bau only has a one-tile coastline, and the Muisca are still struggling to approach the city by land, the odds of the city falling are still slim to none. In Ubate, meanwhile, the Kayapo soldiers have finally realized that religious pressure won't make the city surrender. Their second idea is pikes. Also, Marcus Garvey, the controversial Jamaican politician and Seabricks II leader, is a Kayapo great prophet. Perhaps that's why they've suddenly become more active. Rio de la Plata has finally settled the Falkland Islands. They also decide to send a small naval force to protect the city. José de San Martin's advisors are confused as to why such an isolated settlement would need military protection, but San Martin insists that he has a bad feeling about leaving the islands undefended. A closer look at Yemen reveals that they are truly the masters of trade. Their armada of caravans carries goods throughout the Middle East, making the Yemeni people filthy rich in the process. They also have their Bakil Highlander UU, which replaces the swordsman, can claim desert and mountain tiles for Yemen while fortified, granting them a +1 food yield in the process, and aren't slowed by hills. Aside from that, though, Yemen is a fairly unremarkable civilization. Maybe they could sneak a city or two from Turkey or Afghanistan, but they'd lose out in the longer term, so for now, they will trade. Also, Mbarara flipped again. To lead their invasion of Kocho, the Han government hires Bori Shad, a Gokturk general, Western Gokturk specifically, with unfinished business regarding the plucky little city-state. Perhaps with the help of Bori Shad and their Qiang spearman UU, which actually only has culture-related bonuses, Han can finally put an end to Kocho once and for all. Indonesia is finally starting to produce settlers, with 2 present off the coast of Borneo, but it may be too late at this point. Even the worst city locations are being gobbled up by more expansive powers. Case in point, Bengali Sumatra has now been expanded to 2 cities, with the settlement of Midnapore on a nearby one-tile island. Kokang, having lost out on Cavite el Viejo, are now directing their ships towards Malolos in an attempt to finish off the Philippines. However, they only have about half a dozen triremes left, so the city should be able to survive just fine for the time being. Indonesia also lacks a proper navy to threaten the city with. Tang Taizong has led a valiant defense of Burlington, but alas, it seems like the city's time has come. Greenland's triremes have finally reached the city and battered its walls into oblivion, and Vermont simply lacks the troops to fight off all the triremes nearby. Still, Taizong has not fled. If the city shall fall, then he shall fall with it. While invading Iceland, Greenland also elects to casually move into another set of foreign islands, directing their far-flung settler to move north into the British Isles. Will they settle a city here? Greenland should hope not. Ireland does not tolerate outsiders on their home turf. The Muisca have the city of Bau surrounded, and yet it has hardly taken any damage at all. The power of the Amazon rainforest truly is frightening. Ubate, meanwhile, has been damaged into the yellow by the Kayapo onslaught, and the city genuinely looks ready to fall soon. The Kayapo are finally waking up, and it's terrifying. Torii Mototada is recruited as Vermont's second mainland great general, but honestly, his services might not even be necessary. Vermont has planted Holsteinsborg into the black, and if they can somehow get a melee unit to the front lines, they can replace their Icelandic city with a conquest of their own. Kocho's defenders have abandoned their defensible positions around the city to meet the Han soldiers head-on, while the Han troops have citadels and hills to position themselves on. The Kocho soldiers have managed to surround the Han invaders somewhat, but even then, their position is dubious. To the west of this epic showdown, meanwhile, a Kokang settler continues to wander through the Taklamakan desert in search of a place to call home. Burlington has finally fallen, placing Iceland in Greenlandic hands. However, even this might not be enough to give Greenland a path to Europe, considering that Brandenburg has 2 settlers on the way to claim various islands nearby. That said, Iceland is worth quite a lot on its own. It's a victory that's been a long time coming, but it is a victory for Greenland nonetheless. Incan Polynesia continues to be quiet and peaceful, surprisingly so. Despite Chile's rampage through Incan waters, these islands show no signs of being under threat. In fact, the Inca have another settler present just to the southeast of Vitkos. While Chile might not be interested in contesting the region, though, it seems like the Maori just might. They've built a settler in Watiwatihoe, and who knows where it's headed. It seems that Chile's navy has fallen for one of the classic blunders, slamming into well-defended coastal cities uselessly. Hell, it seems like the Chilean navy is attempting to attack Quito, despite the city lacking a coastline altogether. This is a tragic waste of good triremes, and considering that Chile's land forces are never going to make any progress in the Andes Mountains, this seems like the end for any hope of a city capture in this war. Brandenburg, now at peace, is finally free to look inward and develop itself culturally. First on the agenda is the establishment of a government, and, of course, Brandenburg has founded a monarchy. How fitting. Aside from that, though, Brandenburg is looking solid, albeit a bit underwhelming. They need to put their high production into use and build their military back up if they want a shot at cracking any of their neighbors. They do have plenty of great generals, though. After a long, long war, Turkey finally negotiates a peace with Egypt. However, rather than negotiating with the House of Commons in Thebes, which holds the de facto power in Egypt, Ataturk negotiates with Akhenaten directly, and Akhenaten takes the opportunity to dispose of the ones who have supplanted him. He hands over the city of Thebes to Turkey, and before the Commons can react, the parliamentary building is torched, and the Commons members are forced to flee the city. Akhenaten is back in power, but it's come at the cost of one of his only 2 remaining cities. Not that he isn't too far gone to care about that, of course. While the Massagetei comeback was incredible, it sadly seems to be coming to an end. Iskar is solidly back in Permian hands, and Oxus is under heavy assault. The Permians are splitting their units, which might allow the Massagetei to hold on for longer, but something has to change fast, or the Permians are going to, at the very least, reverse all of the Massagetei gains. Roger of Loria, famed for his capture of Sicily for the Aragonese in real life, leads the American Navy in the assault of Vilcabamba and Tiwanaku. He's made the contentious decision to split the fleet in 2, but without any defenses for either city save for a single trireme in Tiwanaku, his plan just might work. Or it could be a total waste of 10 perfectly good triremes. Time will tell. Further south, though, we have an entirely successful city capture. Ubate has fallen to the Kayapo and is currently burning. Bau remains mostly untouched. The Wiradjuri military has been clamoring for another shot at the Yolngu, and Windradine is finally ready to give them what they want. It's time for round 3, and this time the Wiradjuri are out for blood. However, the Yolngu military is ready, and they're as strong as ever, so expect another bloodbath, assuming the war doesn't immediately end. In other news, looking at the very right of the screen, the Wiradjuri finally seem ready to settle the eastern coast of Australia. RIP to the Maori settler that could have settled there. The Quaks and the Modoc continue to hold out against their respective invaders. Tsaxis is starting to feel the weight of the Kree invasion force, taking a bit of damage, but the city is mostly untouched. That said, the Kree are also bringing more and more non-mounted units to the front lines, so the Quaks aren't out of the woods just yet. The Modoc are also doing surprisingly well against the Mojave, although their carpet is beginning to thin slightly. They're safe for now, especially since the Kree are busy elsewhere, but this could be the beginning of a very slow end for them. And finally, here's a quick look at the Quak-Ainu War. The Ainu Navy has, rather predictably, been routed by the Quak fleet, but the Ainu composite bowmen have taken up positions along the coast to harass Quak ships as they try to make the perilous journey toward the Ainu capital. This war is almost certainly going nowhere fast. And that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care and be sure to tune in next time for what will surely be an even more exciting episode. This is Nopecopter, Doc Ito, the Professor, and Mary Ann, saying thank you for listening.